Thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of The Work. I'm super stoked about today's guest. His name is Scott Mac Donough. He is a New York City photographer. He has taken shots of some of the world's most famous people. One that stood out to me was Kendall Jenner, which I thought was pretty cool. But he is so much more than that. He's an artist, he's a sculptor, he's a surfer, and personally, the coolest thing to me is that he absolutely cares about the planet to his core. So we chop it up about life in New York City during the quarantine. He helps me shift through some internal questions of my own concerning diet and morality. And overall, it was just a really fun interview. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, here is Scott Mac Donough. Man, cool. Thanks, Scott, for coming and being on my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Right on. So first things first, man. Where are you from, Scott?
So my dad was in the Army. I was born in Germany. Both my parents are from Northern California, but they just happened to be in Germany, stationed there when I was born. And we moved around the States growing up consistently through my childhood. And then I spent a lot of time in California, and more recently, the rest of my life in New York City, or at least based out of New York City.
What part of Germany?
Frankfurt, Germany.
So you know Bitburg?
I don't. We moved when I was 3.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My dad was also stationed in Germany, so I spent some time in Bitburg, but I got to go to Frankfurt as well.
Okay.
Yeah, man. Cool. So from Germany, so army brat, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, man. That's incredible. So from Germany, you then come to the States, and you kind of grew up in California?
No, we bounced around. I think I counted 12 states growing up. So we were like Texas, Kansas, back to Texas, then New York. Then I was in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and then out to California. I went to California because being a surfer was my dream. And so as soon as I left the house, I went to California. I went to college at UCSB. So, but that was my dream, and it was all about surfing.
Nice, man. Yeah, that's why I dig your energy. So a little bit of a backstory. Me and Scott were both quarantined here in Manhattan, and it's a very unique energy in the city right now. And that's kind of what makes this podcast kind of exciting, because it's not just about the work as a whole. Of course, it's an homage to this really great philosophical thinker, but it's also about what's going on in present day, like what's going on in our lives and how are we as people growing. And here in New York right now, I think what they say, 500,000 people have left the city.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
right. 500,000 people have left the city. So a lot of my friends, I know you have friends that are gone. And so you're kind of meeting new people, and you're in this kind of new atmosphere within this kind of new norm. And I see this guy a couple days ago, or a week or so ago, and just having a great time, with this like wonderful aura, this wonderful energy, and I had to talk to him, and sure enough, he's an incredible person, and I
just sitting there by myself having fun.
Yeah, right. And come to find out, he's got a really incredible story. So I was blown away by your age. You seem like you're younger than me, but how old are you?
I'm 44.
44 years old, man. If you could see him.
Yeah, you'd never know.
You never know, man. I mean, he was over there breakdancing and just, laughing it up with so many people. So how long have you been in New York City?
So I've been here since 2002. I visited several times before then. I was actually here for 9/11, but I moved here in 2002. I'm almost positive, just because of looking back at photos.
Once upon a time, something that was the year 2000 was pretty high tech, and now if you get a TV that was from the year 2000, it's old and janky, or even a car. But so you've lived some years here. What was the first place that you lived when you came to New York?
I actually lived here in the Meatpacking. I lived right on the corner of 14th Street and 9th Avenue, like right above a bar, the Gaslight. And it was super loud. It was quiet during the day, really pleasant. And then around 4 a.m., like all the cabs are just playing Morse code outside our window. It was crazy. And that was a kind of a fun time. We would just kind of open the windows super late night, and there was pretty much regularly a fight as everybody's exiting the bars. It's just your nightly entertainment. It's pretty fun.
So how does a surfer from California end up in New York City?
Oh man, well, so I've followed my passions everywhere, like consistently. I've just kind of through life just followed what I wanted to do. When I went to California, it's because I wanted to surf. I became an engineer, mechanical engineer. I was building robots. Then I realized I was living all my life inside an office building. So I started art directing at a surfboard company because I wanted to surf more. Then I realized, well, making surfboards is a pretty bad environment for your health. There's a lot of fumes, and I had a lot of concerns about it. I love the art aspect of it, but as far as all the fumes that I was breathing, I had a lot of health concerns. So I just wanted to move to New York to be a sculptor. I just wanted to come here and pursue art at the highest level, and that was my motivation. I've had a lot of friends from California come and go, and I understand why, because there's a certain connection to nature that you miss when you're here. But if you were motivated to make something happen, you want to go to the mecca of this place, or wherever that would be, to reach the highest levels. And so, that's what I was doing.
Yeah. So is this the drive to reach your fullest potential? It was like, I want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And New York has that pull. I think that's what landed me here too. I had a decent career. I was able to fight and travel the world and whatnot. But I had reached a point where it's like I now am at a point where I want to pull out the best out of myself. And there's only one place that I can think of that can offer me that challenge or that opportunity. And so you come here, surfer, you want to be a sculptor. But then as I know you and as I meet you, you identify as a photographer.
Right. So I sculpted for a bit. I did a surfboard series I collaborated with some photographers, doing some really unique artistic kind of like mixed sculpture, mixed media on surfboards. So it was a little bit of part, like all my history going on. And then the recession hit, and I had kind of been dabbling in photography, and I had a girlfriend, and I just started taking pictures of her, and then she happened to be a model, and she showed them to her agency, and then pretty soon the agencies were just liked the way that I took pictures, and so then that kind of evolved, and we parted ways, and I got another girlfriend, and she was a stylist, so I just immediately jumped into like having clients, and kind of just jumped right into the consistency of photography, being able to have a financial basis that art didn't, like, because art is in a lot of ways it's a luxury, and photography was a necessity. Like, there's a whole industry behind it, and so I found reliability in being able to pay my bills, and liked that, and I liked the social form of working with people and pulling together projects and doing it in a creative way, and it was stimulating. And sculpture is still my first like art form that I connect with and love, but photography's fun, social. It's got a lot of the elements that please me too.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth to photography. It's not hard to find a photographer in New York City, and actually it's not hard to find a photographer in the world nowadays, because there's a camera on every phone, and everybody is slowly becoming pretty well versed in this kind of dynamic. Not to say that you're not an incredible photographer, because you are, but I was just trying to make the point that, to me, the most interesting part about you was not that you were a photographer, because of course you can meet a lot of those here. What stood out to me the most when meeting you was your passion for existence. Like, I can't, just to sum it up, it was really remarkable. I mean, for me, that's what this podcast and the work is all about. It's about meeting individuals who are doing the work, who are aware of the work, and are living that life, and can transcend whatever modality they're using to make money or to express themselves. But at the end of the day, they're just aware of what it takes to be human, and how can we best be a part of this collective together. And so your awareness for the collective, I felt to be extremely profound. And so right away you started to speak to me about wildlife and nature. And so I definitely wanted to speak with you more about that, because I think that you have an incredible take on that. So please.
Well, so I mean, getting back into like, I agree with you. There's so many photographers. Everybody's a photographer these days. But what's important is, what do you have to say? And that also correlates to my experience in art. Like, when I came to New York, I was thinking totally aesthetically. Everything I did was aesthetic. And this introduction to another level is the concept. And it's just like, so everybody can, like, so I actually totally stopped making photographic surfboards because I didn't feel like it was authentic, and I didn't feel like the depth of the concept was there. So I was selling surfboards for, I think the last one sold for $28,000. And I totally stopped the series because, for me, people were buying them and not riding them. So I didn't feel like it was authentic. And then I started thinking about what it looked good on the surfboard rather than what's behind it, what's the deeper meaning. And so that also is the same with photography. And so now everybody can take a picture, everybody can make a nice Instagram, but what do they have to say? And that is so important to me. When I like look at somebody else's work, or in my own work, I'm constantly considering that, like, what am I saying? Why am I doing this? And it's a lot harder. It's not harder, but it's more important. It's a lot more challenging. And to convey that with beauty or however you want to do that, those are things I wrestle with now. It's like, just the purpose. What's the point? What am I doing? And I try to pursue that on everything. And I think that pushes me into a more meaningful space, and for me, more purpose, rather than repeating superficial things. Like, I just want to keep digging deeper and wanting to inspire myself and other people, hopefully, I mean, through it. So
yeah, I think that's remarkable that there's a degree of service in everything that you do. And I think service is something that it doesn't have a wonderful ring to it. I think in like the Western world, we don't readily say that I want to live a life of service. I would like to be of more service. I think that it's a valiant pursuit to get to a point in your life where you can transcend monetary gain, although monetary gain might be a byproduct. But at the end of the day, you're saying, what am I really offering? What is behind it, like you were saying? And I just thought that was the coolest thing about you from the get-go, was you had transcended the superficial layers of certain things, although you could have easily rode that wave, and you could have just been a guy who knew famous people and did these types of things and knew models and did this. But as I met you, you were a little bit, upset that you were not able to go to Alaska and do this project that was with wildlife. Or tell me more about this project.
Okay. So again, like in the sense, like I got to backtrack a bit, because I'm following my passion. So I'm in New York, I'm shooting, I have clients, but I feel unfulfilled. I'm everything's going great, but like I wasn't connecting with fashion as a philosophically, like it was a material pursuit. So in discussing some of these things, I don't want to offend other people. A lot of time, like I'm when I have a conversation one-on-one, I know who I'm talking to, and like I know, like I'm not going to upset somebody on their path, because the choices I make and the I guess the judgment on myself that I take, it's my own path, and I recognize that. And sometimes I come to conclusions that maybe somebody else is fully pursuing or something like that, and I don't want to offend somebody, but for myself, I wasn't connecting with the material pursuit of fashion and selling clothes, selling especially as I got more into animal welfare, selling fur or things I didn't want to push, and just you start to realize that there's flaws in what you're pushing. And so while I was shooting all this stuff, I was also spending my vacations volunteering at around the world for environmental reasons or animal welfare reasons. My girlfriend and I, we volunteered at a circus animal retirement home in California. rehabilitation center in South Africa, environmental invasion, removal of species, of environmental invasion of Galapagos. And so I was kind of being educated in all these other issues going on in the world, and they started to mean a lot to me. And while we were in New York, we started fostering dogs, and so I think we fostered 11 dogs, a majority of them pit bulls, and really started getting involved with animals. And I just started noticing that humans are kind of tearing down the earth everywhere you go. And then,
yeah, like you said yesterday, though, you said, and the animals, they aren't, they're living their peace. They're living in their place. I don't know. When you said that yesterday, so not to interrupt, but I will say that Scott's passion for this is extremely infectious. I promise you this, because as we were sitting by the pier yesterday, I told him, I said, to be honest, Scott, I've lived a lot of life as a vegan, spent years as a vegan. I said, but I don't really care about animals. Like, not really, and I hate this, not to try to offend anybody, but I was just making the point that I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, cuddly this, or I couldn't do this because this animal that. I don't really think about it that much. I dig them and I like them, and I don't necessarily like the idea of eating flesh often, but it's not something that I really think about wholeheartedly. But then in hearing you tell your side of it and your perspective, it was like immediate to me. I was like, dang, that makes sense, man.
Well, we all get introduced to different issues in different ways there's so many things to work on in the world. I support other people on other issues, and just like, but sometimes it's based on awareness or relatable experience. And I think maybe in a situation some people can relate to is with dogs, like I said, we fostered 11 dogs, and a lot of them pit bulls. And once you connect with a pit bull, once you love one pit bull, you're like, I love pit bulls. They're just like the most incredible species. They're just or breed, I'd say, and just their characteristics of there's the loyalty and their energy, and I love them as a breed. And when you see how they're treated in the world and how sometimes they're raised, you start to really care for that topic, and then you don't want any pit bull to be treated bad or to be seen as malicious, or to be understood at least as a
bad animal.
Yeah. And so maybe other people can see that, and then there's correlations. Like my dad was like, why do we want to preserve a rhinoceros? I don't care about a rhinoceros. They'll run us over. And I'm like, well, a rhinoceros took millions and millions of years to evolve to this place. Like, it's an incredible adaptation to the earth, to its environment. It's unbelievable. And I don't think we should wipe it off the planet. I don't think we have the right. And it's interesting because you see a lot of people, because I'm involved with following a lot of animal rights people, you see people raise rhinos in captivity and in protected spaces, and then you see their personalities come out, and you're like, wow, they have all these incredible connections with people, and it's just a matter of creating those bonds. Yeah. And when they're in the wild, you don't see those bonds, you don't experience them. And so getting people to care about something that they don't experience is a big challenge. Yeah. And so when it comes to conservation, and let's say for Alaska, the reason I wanted to start the Alaskan experience, and it was a way to partially make income in the space of conservation, and also educate people and get people out there, is to take groups of people on experiential trips and tours of Alaska. And so you're going out and you're seeing wild, like untamed frontier, and experiencing it, and then caring about preserving that, and seeing how much is in these places where you think, oh, nobody lives there, nothing's there. Well, there's a lot there. It's just no people are there to tell you about it. And so you start to care about it, and then you want to preserve it, and you want to like actually from New York City, you can make an impact by how you vote, how you think, like, you know, like how what you want to do with that land. Yeah. And I'd like to leave it alone.
Yeah. That's interesting, because the way that you describe pit bulls is oftentimes how I actually see people. And what I mean by that is there are people that will look at pit bulls and they will say, well, certain pit bulls have done this. Pit bulls are this type of breed. And then on the other side, people will say, well, no, because if you raise a pit bull like this, then a pit bull can become this, you know, it'll become that. And so it's really just a matter of the environment and the nurturing and the care. So it's not necessarily the pit bull that's the problem. It's the environment and the nurturing. And I always look at people like that. I'm always like, people are good. People are genuinely good. And it's really the environment and the nurturing that causes somebody to react or behave like a pit bull. And I genuinely see that. I not only just see that in myself, but I mean, I've experienced it with, you know, my family members or people that I know. And I'm always just like, we're not bad. We don't have these, you know, people are not intending to. I always thought that to myself, that like nobody is inherently bad. You know, it just is just a matter of the lack of love or the lack of cultivation of their talents and gifts. And I'm really in a place right now where I'm dreaming that type of attention and care to detail for people, but you're doing a great job in that, because you're not only trying to expose people to the planet and in a way that they can have a more harmonious kind of experience. I think that will also be a benefit towards people being able to grow into better people, just by being more open-minded and more aware of the whole, and rather than being like more narrow-minded. I certainly feel more empowered by your passion, having heard it, than if I wouldn't have.
I think open-minded is the key, you know, and just being open to another perspective, because again, it's just awareness or a lack of experience, and so for each of us on different topics. And so each of us can, you know, introduce each other to something else. And
yeah, to meet somebody in New York City, that's a rarity. Okay, so meeting a photographer in New York City is not a rarity. It's meeting somebody with this type of global awareness within this city. That is phenomenal, and I consider myself very, very lucky and you know, very grateful that I was able to have this encounter. And you know, for however you want to think or not, maybe like they say, like your vibe will attract your tribe. I certainly agree with that. And so this has been remarkable for me, because it's also shed some light on how I would like to behave, which kind of leads me to my next question, because Scott introduced me to a book called Sapiens, and I don't know if anybody listening has read it. I'm sure somebody listening has, because it's something that has made its way into my into my atmosphere multiple times, and he brought it over to me, and I can't wait to read it. But the questions that I have, you brought up the concept, and that's the key word, is concepts. You said something from the book that I found myself repeating almost automatically, was that, what were you saying, that the not chimpanzees, but it was
chimpanzees are capable of relating to and knowing 150 people or 150 individuals. So their troops max out at 150.
So chimpanzees can only identify or kind of like comprehend 150 as a social group. Beyond that, they probably just don't know what to do with that 151st chimpanzee. But you were saying that the big distinction, what separates us from that, is the fact that we can create concepts that can then put things into groups. And so you can have an umbrella, for instance, like maybe you can have Christianity, and you can say, well, now I can now comprehend infinite amount of people if I just put them in the group of Christianity, or I can put them in the group of American, or this, that, and the other. So now we're creating these concepts, right? Am I correct? Or...
Yeah, I mean, this is all from the book, which makes a lot of sense. So like some of the concepts it's a collective belief in something that gives it a value. And so, and then it creates structure. So religion is one, countries, money, and I start to see these things in other places too, which is interesting. Is like teams, like when you see like team loyalty. You're like, well, that's like it creates a unity. Like you see two people with a Patriots hat on, they like each other,
right?
And that's just like, that's a concept that there's a structure to, like something that they know to relate to each other about.
Yeah. Something you can subscribe to very easily and just kind of make choices easily, like kind of
conformity and regularity, and that's where it talks about the origin of religion, and I think religion is the greatest order of that has created worldwide and like creates structure within all our societies, and was such a huge purpose of maintaining that through the man, I guess you'd say, like the people, the few people running this world. I think they want religion to be maintained,
Oh, yeah, because of the order, right? It
right.
keeps people in line.
And morality, and without it, you're like, people, who knows what would happen. So.
And so to me, it's so funny, Scott, that you say this, because this is the question that I am internally struggling with today as we speak. So as me and Scott were speaking yesterday, we were having a conversation, and I was telling him that I am so finicky on my subscription to concepts. Maybe one day I'm a vegan wholeheartedly, and it's important to me because I feel like it's better for the planet. And then I'm like watching myself consume vegan foods from all over the world, and I realize my carbon footprint is way larger than if I was just eating a local grass-fed animal. And then you have these other people that are, they talk about this type of ruminant care and making sure that you have this type of structure because it's better for the ecosystem. So I understand both sides of the story, and I flip-flop between both. Maybe one, because honestly I really want to just do a good job. I'm honestly trying. And so what I was wrestling with today, though, is I thought to myself, okay, realistically, and I was telling you this, I was like, realistically, eating local, for sure, if you're going to protect the actual planet, it seems like going local is the way to go. Okay, so if I'm going local, I'm in New York, I can't eat mangoes, I can't eat dried mangoes, I can't eat hemp seeds, so most of the vegan diet is out the window. I'm down to eating this way. But then I thought to myself, as I'm doing my yoga class here in my apartment, and I'm very much inspired by Dharma Yoga, Dharma Mitra. And Dharma Mitra is 81 years old, and he is one of like the biggest components of like a vegan diet. And I'm thinking to myself, here's this guy who's 81 years old. He's super healthy for an 81-year-old person. He is offering so much goodness in his concept to the world, because the concept alone of what he's giving you creates a healthy individual. And I thought to myself, what is more important is at this point in time, is it for individuals to have a healthy concept of morality, of being? Does that outweigh the actual carbon footprint that you are going? Because maybe there's no going back on the decimation of the planet right now. You get what I'm saying? Like maybe we're too far gone, and maybe the most important thing right now is the concept, is the vegan concept. People say it's better for the planet, and I'm wrestling with that, because I'm like, it's not better for the planet in a lot of ways, right? Because we're going back to like local, like the Native Americans here were not, eating vegan diets, and nobody was. But what are we more in need of right now? Are we more in need of healthy individuals with a healthy mental concept, a healthy code of conduct that we can now share with each other? Who knows where it will lead? Or are we going to continue being full of bravado and full of toughness and full of masculinity? So that was my internal dilemma right now. And so I just thought I would ask you.
Well, yeah, I guess for me, there's no perfect solution. And I think the best thing is to not judge yourself and not judge others. Just people need to experience their own, their own form of whatever feels best to them. This book right next to me is how you feel. Like,
what to eat for how you feel. Yeah.
I mean,
my biggest question in life.
Yeah. I mean, so, I think being in tune with yourself and your diet and how you feel mentally and physically, and just experiment and see like what is right,
Yeah. So the book is What to Eat for How You Feel. And that's a big one, how you feel. And it's true that some people are not going to feel quite well about eating an animal. And I mean, but yeah, I wrestle with it. I mean, I'm telling you, man, like, because I hate being an overconsumer. I hate the amount of plastic that you have to. And so we have a local butcher shop here in NYC, and it's from a local farm. And I just feel like a little bit less of a consumer, but I'm also participating in the death of this being. And it's definitely, as soon as I talk to Scott, then I for sure become even more aware of this animal's life and his experience. And so that's well laced inside of the yogic culture, is the fact that all beings are literally trying to exist. They are trying to live, and we don't really have a right to take that opportunity from them. Yeah. I think I'll wrestle with that for many more years to come.
Yeah, I mean, with diet, like I really, that's a very personal thing that I think everybody's got their own journey on, and I always preface that before telling people like how I eat, and I never push my thing on anybody else.
7 o'clock. Just letting you guys know, if you hear clapping, it's because New York City is doing their cheer. So yeah. Good job, workers. Or what are we clapping for again?
Healthcare workers, yeah.
Healthcare workers. How long is that going to go on for?
I don't know.
Maybe just forever? Just the thing we do now at 7 o'clock for the rest of life? I should participate, though. Let me give it a little clap then. Good job, guys. You're doing your thing. I mean, well, there you go. I mean, there's a participation, a concept that we're subscribing to.
Well, yeah. So for me, as far as being vegan or eating meat, like I've started to manage my diet through what I call a DIY diet, and whether I do it myself, like, because I've been exposed to meat eaters, I've been exposed to vegans, I've been exposed to subsistence hunters, I've been exposed to all sorts of different ways of life, and everybody's got their point of view. And for me, I'm just like, okay, well, would I do this myself? And so I know I wouldn't kill a cow because I've looked in their eyes, and I wouldn't kill it just looking in their eye. Like, really? I just would. No, I wouldn't.
Even if you had to. I mean, like, let's say, like.
No, I mean, yeah. So that's the thing. If I had to, I would approach the taking of life like what I understand to be a Native American taking of life. Like they followed the buffalo, they worshiped the buffalo, right. They would hunt. And then when they killed it, they didn't celebrate its death. They didn't say, "Look at me, I'm so powerful." Like, take a picture with it, posing with its head, like they're awesome. But they just revere it, and then they would consume it, eat all of it, and know that they took a life of an animal. And that's what I would do when I would take a life. And I do eat fish, because as much as I love the ocean and swimming and seeing the fish, I would, if I was hungry and needed to, kill a fish. And I'd eat the whole thing, and I'd thank the fish, right. and I would do that, and I would take the responsibility for taking its life, but I would know what I'm doing, connected to the life cycle.
Yeah.
But I do for myself. I've reduced that down to fish, because even with octopus, I know now how intelligent an octopus is. And so I wouldn't want to take that. Yeah, right. They're from what I understand, a octopus is very conscious of itself. So I wouldn't want to take its desire to survive away. Doubt. And not that other fish don't, but when I see a leopard kill an antelope, it's not mourning it. It's just it's part of life. And so, I've experimented with what my body needs to feel good, and personally, I feel like the fish is an important part of my diet. So, but otherwise, I do prescribe to the vegan side of things, where it's no factory farming, and like the more you educate yourself on the dairy cycle, there's a lot of reasons to quit dairy, for health reasons and compassion reasons. So that was a quick and early decision I made. And then when you look at all the antibodies and hormones that are pumped into chickens, and just that whole factory farming world, that's another level. So yeah, these are the conclusions that I've come to, and why I've come to where I am, and I'm super happy. And I contribute a lot of, like what you were saying earlier about me being older than I look. I think that's
younger than you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, younger than I look. a huge factor is diet and just my lifestyle, and my lifestyle being active and moving and positive thinking and staying.
See, that's the thing. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, how important is the concept? Because everybody that I've ever known, you remind me actually of a friend that was a great mentor of mine. I remember I met him when he was 45 years old and I was 24. And he was like you. He was running circles around me when I was 24. I remember I did a triathlon with him. And I was 24 years old. I was fighting in the UFC. And this was the first guy that I had ever met. His name's David Daly. What up, dude? So I'm sure he listens to the podcast. So, this dude was the dude who introduced me to being like a raw foodist and a raw vegan. And he beat me in a triathlon, and I was a young 24-year-old professional athlete. And so that was the first time that I adopted a raw vegan diet, and I went full on. But why I tell this story was it was his energy as a person. It was his positivity for life. It was really what I felt like the driving factor was the concept. It was his belief in the overall concept. He was sharing positivity. He was eating this way for positivity. Now, whether or not like the food was the defining factor in the energy that he was giving to the world, it was his belief in the concept that he emitted, and it showed. And so that's where I'm at right now with it. I'm thinking to myself, if I believe that I need meat, then I certainly need it. But at the time, he had convinced me wholeheartedly that I didn't. And for a while, that's when I got my only knockout in the UFC. I was living with him, and I was like just superfoods and blase. But then I would go live in different environments, and I would shift my mindset and all of a sudden the diet wouldn't work for me anymore. And then I would like blast the vegan diet, and I would say this, that, and the other. And then now here I am in New York, and I'm like watching this dude Dharma Mitra, and I'm like, man, this dude's 81 years old, and he doesn't eat any animal products. He's 81. I don't know of another example of an 80, because I'm trying to think to myself, like, I see young people, if it's even Joe Rogan or any of these people that are fairly like, young, and they're brawny and all that, but they're not 81, so he's the only. I want to be 81 one day and still doing back bends. He's the only example I got. So I'm like, it's doable. Was it his just belief in the concept that got him to that point? Or was it the actual foods that he ate, right? Because why does some diets work for some and they don't work for the other? And so I guess this is why I'm just keep on asking this question. How important is your inner belief in any one concept?
I don't know if it's one thing though. It's a combination of all. Is what the way I see it. And there's a mindset that's common between the people that I don't know the people you brought up, but it sounds like the common thread is there's like it's more than a diet. It
right.
comes from an energy from inside.
Right. It's a belief in the concept.
Yeah.
And you got to subscribe to it.
But greater than just a diet.
Right. Great. Yeah, it's like an overall thing. Like you got to believe in energy. You got to believe so many different things that go into what your body is and what runs your body.
Well, energy is all I have. I thought about why you asked me to be on this podcast, and like I don't have anything to validate. Like there's no affirmations. But I'm just a person with positive energy,
no doubt.
And I'm down to share it, and that's often how I get through my day, and like the people I know and the energy that I share with people through the city, and the good vibes that I have in my life. It's all through energy, and I don't pretend to know everything either. I'm just like a student in a lot of different things. So, but I have experiences that I can share with others, And so I'm happy to. But I thought about that when you invited me to be on the podcast. I'd be like, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? But
man, your positive energy is supreme, man. And you're right. If I could just eat positive energy, I'd live on that alone. I swear to God, and I honestly, I've tried. I go a lot of times without eating. So, the time that I've known Scott, I've been telling him, like, man, I'm scared of food. I ain't even eating really, man, to be honest. Because what happened was the world got super stressful. And I didn't want to be heavy during this whole time. I didn't know what to eat anymore. And, I would say that there are the times in my life where I've actually experienced the most vibrancy and like the what I felt to be energy in the way that I would always love to experience energy in my body. It didn't come from food. It came from an understanding or an experience, and I hate to say it, like psychedelics, but when you're like, say for instance, like in mushrooms or ayahuasca, and me and you have never even talked about that, so I don't know what your experience is. But in those states, I've gone like a really long time without eating, but my energy was like supercharged. I'm like, well, where is it coming from? It's like that let me know that energy in the body is not 100% determined by just what you that heavy substance that you're putting in. It almost seems like that kind of keeps you down in a lot of ways. And in this time, the pace has been so much more slow. I'm not using energy in the same way. I'm not consuming. And so then when I go out to experience the energy of the day, if I meet somebody positive, I'm more in that moment, and I'm eating off of that positive energy, and I'm feeling good. And so that leads me to, I'm so thankful because this show is called The Work, so I get to talk about George Gurdjieff for just a second, man. So this is cool, man. So for those listening, and I don't reference it a lot, this is called The Work, and it's really based off of one of my favorite thinkers, man. His name's George Gurdjieff. So if you like George Gurdjieff's work, you're probably a friend of mine. But what Gurdjieff says is that you are actually inside of a chemical food factory. That is actually what your human body is. That actually isn't what you are. He says that man, as we know it, man, woman, or just us as conscious beings, we're actually asleep. That his whole notion was that you're here to learn how to wake yourself up. Not that you were born with a spirit. You actually were not born with a spirit, but your job is to grow and cultivate a spirit from within inside of this chemical food factory. And he says that this human body that is a chemical food factory, it takes food of 3 different types. It takes the air that you breathe, the food that you consume, and the impressions that you take in. And he goes on to say that it's easy to see that the air that you breathe is a type of food, because if you stop breathing, then of course the human machine will perish very quickly. If you stop eating food of the food that you eat and ingest, in a certain amount of time, the body then too will perish. But he says that it's hard to believe that the impressions that you take in are actually a type of food for the body. And he says, well, then how can we solve this? How can I prove to you? He says, well, think about it. If you stop taking in any impression right now, if you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you cannot hear anything, you cannot see anything, you cannot feel anything, all the impressions stop, then where do you exist? You don't exist at all, right? So your body is actually running on these impressions. And you can feel it when a good music hits or a really pretty woman walks in the room. I tell you, sometimes like I can be low on energy and a really, really pretty girl walks in the room. I'll be like, I got another hour left. I'm not leaving wherever I'm at. So, there's different types of food. And I think that's an important thing to note, that we're not exactly using the body exactly how it could be used. And that's actually been something that I've been reminding myself of throughout this time, is that I actually do not know how to work the machine. And nobody's really taught me. I went to 12, 13 years of school, and they taught me physical education where I threw dodgeballs at people, and that was the most that they taught me about how to use my body. So, you had to learn on your own.
That's been one of the things about quarantine too that I've been discovering and wanting to unlock in myself. I've admired people doing superhuman things, like Alex Arnold climbing Yosemite with no rope, and I'm thinking, well, what's the difference between him and me? And just wanting to realize that potential for myself. Like, okay, like let's unlock this in you. Let's see where this goes. And so I think that's where I came across you, is some of my. I guess there's a lot of forms of exploring that, but I was exploring it physically and wanting to like do a couple like calisthenic things that maybe I thought that I've tried in the past and never accomplished, and they were founded in breakdancing. I always wanted to do the flare, so I'm like, okay, well, every day I'm gonna work on the flare, like every single day I gotta keep working on this. But not that that's superhuman, but it like then I saw you do the superhuman things that you do, and I'm like, okay, now I gotta do those. Now I gotta like build this crazy core strength, and so I've been able to cross like certain physical barriers that I've had before to just to try to reach higher levels, I guess.
To reach the potential.
That's right.
there was a movement once called the Human Potential Movement back in like the 70s, and I just thought that was the coolest name. Like we should definitely start another human potential movement. And I'm thrilled, man. I mean, for me, I couldn't have dreamt up a better person to meet in this time that hasn't, because you said something the other day. You said, you're like, oh, for the first time, your knee was hurting a bit, and you said, well, this is the first time I started to feel maybe like old or something. And I thought to myself, man, shoot, like I'm 34 and I'm all banged up, man, and I've oftentimes felt like it's over. Like I've reached my peak. I'm on the downward trajectory, and like, what's the point of even trying anything anymore? And I look at you and I'm like, but there's so much time left, man, because you're just as young as me. And it's because of your energy, and you're going to keep carrying that energy for so much longer. And for people, I just want every single person, no matter the age, to know, wow, I can still do something new. I can still do something new,
totally.
Man. Yeah. And that's, I think, is just one of the most beautiful things. And so we can uplift each other. I mean, I live in a city where I'm watching people who've given up, for all intents and purposes, on their human potential, and have just subscribed to the concept of the rat race. And thank God the rat race has shut down for a little bit. And like you said, like as soon as it did, you're like, wow, man, I'm going to explore my human potential. How many others have taken this time to explore their human potentials? I'm sure tons, and, that's the tribe I want to be in with forever, though, for the rest of my life. I don't see why not. Why do I have to go back to, the rat race? I much more prefer exploring human potential for the rest of my life.
Totally. Well, it's a tricky thing for me because the whole pandemic, I mean, I finally jumped, creating goals for myself to leave my photography career in New York and go into wildlife. And 6 months before the pandemic, I did it. I jumped. I went. I created this whole itinerary, the whole plan for Alaska. I was going to go into wildlife full time, spent all my savings, created all these plans in Alaska, and then the pandemic hit. So there's got to be a higher, for myself, staying positive and figuring out, like, what did I need to learn through this? How can I reinvent everything that I cared about in a more meaningful way? Like, understand myself, my just realignment with my mission, and then go back at it,
Yeah. To continue living a life of fulfillment.
Yeah.
To be fulfilled, which I feel like every human has the right to be fulfilled. And that, I think, is a concept that is useful to even apply to animals, to insects, to anything. And that is exactly what the Buddhist and Buddhists say, is that all beings have a right to be fulfilled. Paraphrase a bit, but it's pretty much that. And to watch you embody that and to watch you live that has certainly inspired me. And I think maybe, it's kind of funny just because we're kind of talking about past conversations that Scott and I had just the other day, and we're also having this conversation now. And just yesterday, I was like, I'm only going to eat local. I'm going to eat animals because I don't care or whatever. Don't know what type of mood I was in. And then now, as we're having this conversation, and I'm sitting, and my wish is for people to be fulfilled, then to subscribe to that concept fully, then I would want every being, everything, to live in fulfillment. It's hard though, because you eat the carrot, and the carrot also was tempting to live out a life of joy and fulfillment. And so how do you remedy all of that? But at the same time, I think, again, I'm going to go back to the idea that the concept is valuable, and maybe again, if your inner constitution, if your body and so needs to have meat and protein and this to heal and to be strong and all that, by all means. But if you find the concept valuable, to wake up in the morning and say, I think that everything in this world exists together in a way that deserves to flow, then I want to do my part to just keep uplifting and keep promoting that. I'm gonna try, but gosh dang it, man, what about that plastic, man?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge guilt factor for me every single day. And it just existence in some way or another, we're there's destruction just through existing, and so there's a responsibility to it. And I do, if we step up to that responsibility, then I think we can find solutions collectively. But if we ignore that,
Yeah.
then we're going to keep destroying the earth. And that's why I'm never a finger pointer, because I'm doing a lot of negative things myself. But to bring awareness to issues so that we can then address them, because we are incredible in finding solutions when we need to or know to. I mean, look at Corona. We've stopped everything for Corona.
Yeah.
But the next thing we're going to have to stop everything for is climate change and climate destruction. And so just not looking the other way when we're making decisions, and don't do things that are detrimental to the environment, and just because we want to, or just do the best we can and acknowledge its flaws too, if there is flaws.
Keyword for me, buzzword, is collectively. The collective. If we could somehow become a collective and know that the decisions, the choices that we make, they have an impact. And you're right, to exist is to die. Everything that you do causes, I mean, even just that's a law for the human body. If you run, you are killing parts of your body. Of course, it'll regrow for a certain amount of time, but to live is to die. Your cells are dying off is from the second that you die. I mean, from the second that you're born. So we know this is a part of humanity. It's not, go back to Buddhism in the sense that it's impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. So we got to be aware of that and okay with that. And so how do we do the best that we can and try to figure out solutions? So we'll wrap it up now, man. We've just had an hour of chit-chatting, which I think was very useful and beneficial for me to work out some of my own kinks and whatnot. And I got to finally touch on some of the work. And my friend Scott here is certainly doing the work, so you're not strong on social media. I noticed you have followers on Instagram, but you don't care too much about it. So
yeah, I it's another concept actually that's in Sapiens. Not to prolong the podcast, but Sapiens brings up an issue about our agriculture, and we were hunter and gatherers first, and then there was a generation of agriculturalists that realized that the hunter and gatherers spent 6 hours a day hunting and gathering, but then we're hanging out the rest, had a great quality of life, right?
Like fun, man.
Right. And so then agriculturally, like as we started to settle, the quality of human life started going down. The individual quality of life went down, but it was more reliable for the species to continue. And that's what I believe also in social media. I think social media brings the individual levels of our life down, but there may be a higher purpose in the ability to communicate. But I think it's abnormal for us to have this emotional surge that happens in comparison and validation. And I constantly analyze the need for validation within myself, because I know who I am. I have a value that I like to have self-respect. And I don't want to care about who's following me, who's liking me. I don't want to do things for the purpose of that. If I do it, I do it. If I don't, great. If people want to follow me, cool. If people want to like it, cool. But otherwise, I'm not going to worry about it. As little as I can. I'm human, so it does affect me, but I really, really try to remove myself from it and try to minimize my time on it.
Yeah, right? What a beautiful way to think, because you don't want anything to disrupt your self-worth, right? Because you have it. So why risk it on somebody on like, okay, I put this out and X amount of people didn't like it, and now all of a sudden there's a disruption to your self-worth.
Yeah, but there is value in at the same time. Is like it's so interesting because like you said earlier, your vibe is your tribe. So really instantly you can go on somebody's social media and see quickly how in alignment they are with your thought about the day, or how they see themselves, or how they want to project themselves. There's a lot of ways to interpret somebody's feed, but you could pretty quickly discern like who's your people and who's not.
Right.
And I don't know, that's why I do participate, because I do feel like I also don't want to like not be fully myself, because if I do have something to say, I want to have a place to say it, and people that care about me can hear it. But I guess what I focus on there is that I know enough people, and I want I want whatever I put there to be respected, and I'm not searching for more people. And so it's never my search for numbers. And I think when people did start caring about that, we got lost. And I think social media has all the priorities in all the wrong places, and it should be based on soul and respect and righteousness, and not likes and followers and bullshit.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you say that. You're like, well, there was a quality of life with hunter and gatherer, and it evolved. Maybe what's that?
So I dropped that topic. So several generations into having left the hunter and gatherers, the quality of life was absolutely terrible for the individual, but they weren't able to see back enough generations to know to go back to being a hunter and gatherer.
Wow.
So I feel the same has happened with social media. Like, we're pretty much going to end up in these Black Mirror situations where our whole value is based on how many followers we have, how many likes we have, these crazy like social experiments. But nobody's going to remember that New York was way better before we had Instagram. 100 times better. Yeah. Like, it was so much more fun.
Oh yeah,
so much more present. You know, I don't know.
You did say something that I found to be fascinating when you said, but it was almost necessary for the species. And so it's almost like when I think about the wave, I think about, again, I go back to like Buddhism and his concept of the Dharma, and how, and even like in Taoism, they're like, the Tao just exists. It's the way. It's an unfolding. It's rolling out. It's a wave. And you can't stop the wave. So you got to be aware of it, that these things are happening not because we did it, but because this is what's necessary. So everything that's actually happening in the world, whether it's social media, whether it's coronavirus, whether it's this, whether it's actually an unfoldment of a wave of energy. That is, it's happening. I like to believe that it's happening for the species, or because to me, the wave, when I look at a wave in the ocean, no matter how big or how disruptive it may be to whatever is in its path, I never look at it as wrong. I say, oh, that wave was wrong, that tsunami was wrong. I said, that's the way the ocean was, and that it unfolded the way that it was supposed to unfold. And like Alan Watts says, that energy just moves in waves, and that's just what's happening. So as we've unfolded as a species and all of that, and we've, new things have unraveled and unveiled and unrolled into what they are, it's just the way that it is. And so when agriculture came, it was the wave presenting itself as the way for energy to keep moving. As Corona presents itself as it is, this is the wave of so that energy can keep moving. If it didn't happen like this, it wouldn't be truth. This is truth. This is reality. This is what's happening. And so with social media being a part of the wave, it's a part of the unfoldment of energy. It's a part of the evolutionary process. It's a part of the species. It's a part of how we continue to grow. There's no doubt about it that Corona has created a way for the species to grow and evolve. It's created a shift. And how do we become more aware because of that? And I think there's so many people that are becoming more aware because of that. So maybe it's awareness that's really trying to bring itself out constantly over and over again. Like, maybe to become more aware, we had to stop hunting and gathering. We had to actually start working together as a community, and we had to start doing this type of stuff because it's awareness, it's consciousness that is continually trying to unfold itself, something like that. But my man, Scott, this is cool, man. I'm so very thankful. I won't doubt that we will have another conversation again. I'm excited to continue learning from you. This is going to be a great part of my life path.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So everybody out there, I hope you're safe. I think we're closing in on the tail end of this really wild. No, we're not at the tail end. It's actually probably the weirdness is probably just getting started. So buckle up, enjoy the ride, and thank you for listening. This is The Work. Peace.